are still these questions that remain. With Maduro's whereabouts unknown, the Venezuelan vice president would take power under Venezuelan law. But as we've been saying here with this last interview we just did live, there was no confirmation that that has happened. But she did issue a statement demanding the United States provide proof of life for Maduro and Flores as well. Now, this attack itself lasted less than 30 minutes, and I did want to share with you just some of the video that we do have coming into our newsroom here. So this is from overnight. As I just said, lasting less than 30 minutes. We do know there were at least 7 blasts, and people were rushing into the streets. It's not known at this time as well if there are any deaths or injuries on either side. These are all questions that we are hoping President Trump will give us answers to in just about an hour and a half here. Now, last week, the CIA was behind a drone strike at a docking area believed to have been used by Venezuelan drug cartels, the first known direct operation on Venezuelan soil since the U.S. began strikes in September. As of Friday, the Trump administration said it had struck 35 alleged drug boats and killed at least 115 people in those attacks. This is just some of the videos that we have been bringing you over the past several months here that were typically posted to social media from the Trump administration of these attacks on these alleged drug boats. So just in, and I'm actually going to ask my producer if we can see if we can get more information on this. I'm seeing President Trump says Maduro and his wife are aboard a U.S. warship and will face prosecution in New York. So once again, this just coming in here, we're going to see if we can work to find a statement for you from President Trump. But we do see now President Trump saying Maduro and his wife are aboard a U.S. warship. That is just coming in here via the Associated Press. So we are going to continue to look for more information on that. And again, I've been saying here that we have just had so much news coming in here at such a rapid rate. This is what we're working with. We have all of these live feeds. We do have a continuous live stream here of updates that we are bringing to you in real time, as well as these statements that are coming in over here. So what I'm going to do right now, I just want to leave you with this as we work to confirm that from President Trump on our end, because the Associated Press has confirmed that Maduro and his wife are aboard a U.S. warship. I'm going to leave you on this image here out of Venezuela of Maduro supporters. Give us one moment here on our end. We're going to try to see where we can find that for you.
Somos nosotras, las mujeres, junto a nuestros hombres, quienes vamos a defender cada palmo, cada territorio y cada espacio de esta patria grande que nos dejó Bolívar, que nos dejó Chávez y que Maduro es nuestro presidente constitucional. Te queremos aquí, Maduro, en Miraflores. No vamos a permitir a nadie que no sea Nicolás Maduro Moro en la República Bolivariana de Venezuela. Que viva Chávez, que viva Nicolás y que vivan todos los pueblos libres de este hermoso país y de esta hermosa y grande Venezuela.
Gracias, compatriota. Camarada rector Giovanni Peña, de la Universidad de la Ciencia de la Salud. Adelante.
Hoy, el imperio norteamericano dirigido por Donald Trump ha cometido el más grave error histórico. A un hombre que profundizó la democracia revolucionaria.
All right, so thank you for staying with us here on Live Now from Fox. So we do have this statement in here from President Trump. He was just on Fox News moments ago, and he's saying, I've never seen anything like this. I was able to watch it in real time, and I watched every aspect of it. It was amazing to see the professionalism, the quality of leadership, just amazing. So once again, just appearing via phone on Fox and Friends moments ago. That is a statement there from President Trump, as we are now learning that he also said Maduro and his wife are aboard a U.S. warship and will face prosecution in New York. Now, Trump also saying in an interview this morning with Fox that the United States will be making decisions on what is next for Venezuela after capturing the Latin American country's president and flying him out of the country. A quote here from President Trump saying, we'll be involved in it very much as to who will govern the country. He goes on to say, we can't take a chance in letting somebody else run and just take over what he left or left off. So that is coming in from our Fox News team here on Live Now from Fox, ahead of hearing from the president in just an hour and a half at this point. So as this news does continue to come in here, I did just want to quickly recap for our viewers what we do know as of right now. The United States hit Venezuela with this large-scale strike early this morning and did say very early on this morning that Maduro had been captured and flown out of the country. But all this comes after months of stepped-up pressure from Washington in a nighttime operation announced by the president. All right, and we do have a new post coming in here from one of our Fox reporters that I wanted to share with you here. Brian Yanis, as he's saying, Trump says this morning on Fox, Maduro and his wife were taken to the USS Iwo Jima by helicopter. They were then headed to New York City, where they are now being indicted for narco-terrorism charges. So President Trump just sharing this once again on Fox News, and now our Fox reporter is just putting this out. Looks like we've got another post. Trump tells Fox U.S. forces practiced by building an exact replica of the house where Maduro and his wife were captured. We do have a quote here saying, I mean, everything was pinpoint, every single they had, everything they practiced. They actually built a house which was identical to the one they went into with all the safes, all the steel all over the place. So this is new information we're learning here, just coming into our newsroom, as President Trump just telling Fox that U.S. forces practiced by building an exact replica of the house where Maduro and his wife were captured. That quote there from President Trump, as he was just on Fox and Friends moments ago. Can we get back the first statement? All right. So I just want to quickly recap this if you are just tuning in, as this is just coming into our newsroom rather here. So learning these two key pieces of information. We do know that Maduro and his wife were taken by helicopter, and now they're being headed to New York City, where they are being indicted for narco-terrorism charges. Also, just learning moments ago there, though, that they were on and let me pull back up this information, aboard a U.S. warship. So all of this coming in at about the same time here, learning about the whereabouts, because that was a big question we had here this morning, is where exactly was Maduro? Where was he being taken to? So now we're getting some of those answers starting to come out here from President Trump during that interview. What I wanted to do is continue to just recap, though, for you here before we got this breaking news in here, just recapping what exactly we did see there last night, because we do have several videos that I wanted to share with you here if you are just tuning in, as we saw multiple explosions ringing out and low-flying aircraft just sweeping through the Capitol as Maduro's government immediately accused the United States of attacking civilian and military installations. And the Venezuelan government called it an imperialist attack and urged citizens to take to the streets. And that's what we have been seeing there live in the streets of Venezuela, as I give you that live look there once again. As we're listening in there, once again, we do see those supporters there, and that comes after the government did tell them to take to the streets. Okay, my producer is saying that we are getting some additional information in here now from our Fox reporter, Brian Yanis, saying Trump says U.S. is going to be very strongly involved in the oil industry in Venezuela moving forward. Also saying Trump says he spoke to Maduro a week ago, and he told Maduro, you have to give up, you have to surrender, and that he was not willing to. So let's put up that other one again, Markima. The first post before this, because this is some new information we're getting in here. So this post saying President Trump says the U.S. is going to be very strongly involved in the oil industry in Venezuela moving forward. And now this other information that we're also getting in here from Brian Yanis. Again, this is all according to President Trump, as he was just on Fox News moments ago via phone. Trump saying he did speak to Maduro a week ago. He told Maduro, you have to give up, you have to surrender, and he wasn't willing to. All of this coming after we did report just about a month or two ago that talks were scheduled between Maduro as well as President Trump. We do see now that President Trump did speak to Maduro just about a week ago. And you are taking that live look there once again out of Venezuela. So we've developed a lot of news here over the past several moments, and I am just taking a moment to refresh here to bring it to you. So we do know Trump said Maduro and his wife were boarding U.S. warship. They're now going to face prosecution in New York. And President Trump also saying in that interview, if you are just tuning in, that the United States will be making decisions on what is next for Venezuela after capturing the Latin American country's president, flying him out of the country. And I do want to read that quote for you once again here on Live Now from Fox. He's saying we'll be involved in it very much as to who will govern the country. And we can't take a chance in letting somebody else run and just take over what he left or left off. Working to see if we can get that sound from the interview there behind the scenes here at Live Now. We're in contact with Fox and friends to see if they will give us that soundbite. We'll bring it to you if we do get it. But the U.S. is now deciding what's next for Venezuela after that Maduro capture, as President Trump just said. And we also did learn here that Maduro was at home when all of this did unfold here. Also, the Venezuelan ruling party leader telling the Associated Press, confirming what President Trump said, that Nicolas Maduro and his wife were at their home when they were captured. So that's a developing point here, answering that question of where is Maduro, more insight into this operation that did unfold very quickly, all of this really unfolding in under 30 minutes here. Also, Vice President J.D. Vance weighing in earlier saying the president offered multiple off-ramps, but was very clear throughout this process the drug trafficking must stop and the stolen oil must be returned to the United States. Maduro is the newest person to find out that President Trump means what he says. Kudos to our brave special operators who pulled off a truly impressive operation. Now, as we've been sharing here throughout the morning, we are getting several reactions in here from social media, and I wanted to share this one with you. My wonderful producer, Markima, she has been on X all morning trying to pull these for you. This is from Keir Starmer saying the situation in Venezuela is fast moving. We will establish all the facts and speak to allies. Our embassy is working to ensure all British nationals in Venezuela are supported. I'm going to see if we have any more additional. Okay, so this is from Senator John Cornyn saying, kudos to President Trump. Maduro was not only an illegitimate president of Venezuela, he was the head of the Cartel de los Soles, a major drug trafficking network involving high-ranking Venezuelan military officers and government officials. He has been indicted in the Southern District of New York for narco-terrorism, conspiracy, and other crimes. His association with the Iranian regime and his proxy, Hezbollah, helped fund terrorism in South America and the Middle East. And he was complicit with the ghost fleets of Russia, Iran, and China used to evade U.S. sanctions and fund the Russian war on Ukraine. So that is some reaction just coming in here. This is from Representative Byron Donalds, a Republican from Florida, saying, Maduro used foreign terrorist organizations to traffic deadly drugs and violence into our country, killing countless Americans. He was one of the largest narco traffickers in the world and a threat to our national security. This morning, he was captured. This is peace through strength. Justice will be served. Thank you, President Trump, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. This is from Lucas Tomlinson with Fox News, saying the capture of Maduro and his wife coincides with the 6th anniversary of U.S. forces killing the Iranian general, also on the orders of President Trump. So all of these reactions coming in here on social media this morning, and I am checking just to see if we do have any more. And again, the only statement we have had here from President Trump was a bit earlier this morning on Truth Social, about 4:30 a.m. Eastern time. But we do know, if you are just tuning in, that President Trump is going to be holding a press conference at Mar-a-Lago, and that's going to be around 11 a.m. Eastern time. So just a little over an hour here. We're going to be bringing that to you. We are going to step away for a commercial break right now on Live Now from Fox. We'll continue our coverage next. And welcome in here to Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Christy Matinos. We continue to follow this breaking news. So President Trump was just on Fox and Friends a short time ago. We are getting that soundbite from President Trump about 15 minutes in length, as we are going to bring that to you in just about 10 minutes time. We're just waiting to get it in here on our end. I wanted to share with you just a quote from that interview with President Trump saying, "I've never seen anything like this. I was able to watch it in real time, and I watched every aspect of it. It was amazing to see the professionalism, the quality of leadership. Amazing." So we are learning a great deal of information from that interview with President Trump. We will bring that to you as soon as we do get that soundbite. In the meantime, we have been seeing this live image coming in here out of Venezuela all morning. These are supporters of Maduro, but we've also seen celebrations happening in the United States of people who are happy that Maduro has been captured. And if you are just tuning into Live Now from Fox, my colleague Josh Breslow will be taking over here in just a matter of moments for me. But I did want to just share with you some of the video that we have gotten in here overnight at some of this that we have seen from this operation. All of this happening in just under 30 minutes. We are learning. So the United States hit Venezuela with this large-scale strike very early today, and multiple explosions rang out. We also saw some low-flying aircraft sweeping through the capital, as Maduro's government immediately accused the United States of attacking civilian and military installations. The Venezuelan government called it an imperialist attack and urged citizens to take to the streets. And that's what we have been seeing there, that live look out of Venezuela. It was not immediately clear right now who is running the country. Another question we had was where Maduro is located, and we do know he was on a U.S. warship. That just came out moments ago there from President Trump. But President Trump announced these developments on Truth Social shortly after 4:30 a.m. Eastern time. And that's the last time we have heard from the president. So in just about an hour here, we are going to be hearing from him at Mar-a-Lago, a live press conference. But President Trump had said in that Truth Social post that Maduro had been, along with his wife, captured and flown out of the country. And that operation was done in conjunction with the U.S. law enforcement. He says details to follow. So we are going to be bringing that to you uninterrupted. The legal implications of the strike under U.S. law were not immediately clear. As we've been sharing with you throughout the morning, we have been getting reaction from both sides of the aisle here. We did hear from Senator Mike Lee from Utah, posting on X that he had spoken with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who did brief him on that strike. Rubio told Lee that Maduro has been arrested by U.S. personnel to stand trial on criminal charges in the United States. Now, the White House has not responded to comment. We did see White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, as she just simply reposted what President Trump had put on Truth Social, a little bit earlier this morning. So we are still waiting to see if we are going to get any of that comment there from the White House on social media as of right now, though we have been monitoring that behind the scenes here. Have not seen anything recently posted, but Maduro was indicted in March 2020 on narco-terrorism conspiracy charges in the Southern District of New York. Maduro last appeared on state television on Friday while meeting with a delegation of Chinese officials in the capital. And the explosions in Venezuela's capital early today, at least 7 blasts, sent people rushing into the streets. We also did see video being posted to social media of what people were seeing and hearing during those explosions. And here is another one of those videos that we are getting in here. These were verified by the Associated Press. But as I've been saying here, this attack lasted less than 30 minutes, and it was unclear if more actions lay ahead, though President Trump said in his post that the strikes were carried out successfully. As of right now, the Federal Aviation Administration did issue a ban on U.S. commercial flights in Venezuelan airspace because of ongoing military activity ahead of those explosions. Now, the strike came after the Trump administration spent months escalating pressure on Maduro, and the CIA was behind a drone strike last week at a docking area believed to have been used by Venezuelan drug cartels, the first known direct operation on Venezuelan soil since the U.S. began strikes in September. For months, President Trump had threatened that he could soon order strikes on targets on Venezuelan land following months of attacks on boats. And here's some of that video that we have been bringing you on Live Now from Fox. What we're going to do here is we are going to switch off. My colleague Josh Breslow is going to be taking over for me My name is Christy Matino. I've been here for the past several hours with you. Please stay with us for our continuing coverage. I'm going to leave you with this live look of Maduro supporters out in Venezuela. We are going to turn up the sound here as Josh takes over for me. Thanks for being here with us.
Hoy también fue el que agarra camionetica para salir. Así que la guerra que ellos dicen que es contra uno, es contra dos, son con los millones de venezolanos y venezolanas que estamos aquí dando la cara por nuestra tierra y no vamos a retroceder nunca, jamás, para la defensa de nuestra soberanía. ¡Viva la patria! ¡Viva Chávez! Y hoy más que nunca que viva Siria y que viva Maduro. Unidad, unidad, unidad de los patriotas y revolución permanente, armada y sobre todo con espíritu combativo. Un abrazo, hermanos y hermanas.
Gracias, Daniela Ponte, de la Generación de Oro. Miren, compatriotas, aquí trajimos estos papelón para hacer mensajes. Los que quieran, vengan a buscar su papelón. Aquí hay también para que den su mensaje. Fe de vida para nuestro presidente Nicolás Maduro. Camarada César Trump, embajador de la patria, su mensaje para toda Venezuela.
¡Que viva la patria! ¡Que viva Chávez! ¡Viva Bolívar! ¡Viva Nicolás Maduro! Estimados compatriotas, hay unos grandes traidores de nuestra república, los que en el este del este promovieron la migración de jóvenes y que después fueron a perseguirlos como causa del supuesto delito en los Estados Unidos y en nuestra América. Esa misma excusa de venezolanos en el exterior que le sirvió al gobierno supremacista yanqui para perseguir a nuestro pueblo, para expulsar a los pobres que fueron a migrar hacia allá, invocados por ellos mismos, en alianza con María Corina Machado, con Leopoldo López y con todo el combo de gente que los sigue y que se atreve hoy a poner en nuestras redes que gracias a Dios que los yanquis vinieron a hacer esto, vinieron a hacer lo otro. Son traidores a la patria, son enemigos del pueblo y son enemigos nuestros personales. Esa gente no merece patria, pero no merece tener amigos en el chavismo. Le han declarado la guerra a nuestro pueblo. Nos han declarado la guerra hace años. Nos han declarado a nosotros, persona por persona. Aquí yo veo camaradas de toda la vida, con los que hemos compartido historias del odio de la derecha. Y nosotros de eso nos hemos burlado durante 25 años. Pero ellos se lo han tomado en serio. Tan en serio que hoy celebran el bombardeo que sufrimos anoche. Que hoy celebran la muerte de venezolanos y venezolanas. Que hoy celebran el secuestro del presidente constitucional de Venezuela. No nos sentamos en la misma mesa. No somos iguales. Nosotros somos los venezolanos de Bolívar. Nosotros somos los venezolanos que creemos en nuestra historia y defendemos nuestro suelo. Ellos son unos traidores. Hoy son menos que antes, pero hay de ellos todavía. Y nosotros tenemos que estar claros que en esta fase de lucha armada en la que entra nuestro pueblo, nuestra revolución y nuestra patria, el que se ponga del lado del imperialismo merece ser tratado como el imperialismo. Yo creo que no puede haber medias tintas en eso y tenemos que tener profunda claridad. Hoy se abre un nuevo decreto de guerra-muerte. Guerra-muerte a los imperialistas. Guerra-muerte a los que apoyan a María Corina Machado y su combo en nuestra república. Y defensa de nuestra paz, que no es la misma paz de ellos, porque ellos quieren la paz que le dieron a Palestina durante más de 70 años. Ellos quieren la paz que le habían dado a nuestro pueblo durante toda la Cuarta República. Una paz con pueblos esclavos. Y esa no es nuestra paz. Nuestra paz es como un pueblo libre. Y eso lo aprendimos con Chávez, lo aprendimos de Bolívar. Y el presidente Nicolás Maduro nos lo recuerda todos los días. En las próximas horas tenemos que estar muy atentos del llamado que haga la Central Bolivariana Socialista de los Trabajadores. El llamado a huelga general organizada en contra de la oligarquía. La clase trabajadora no podemos darle una hora de trabajo a la oligarquía venezolana. Que no reproduzcan real, que no reproduzcan sus dólares con el sudor de la clase obrera venezolana. Ese es un llamado fundamental que hizo el presidente Nicolás Maduro. Estimados compatriotas, otra consigna es fundamental. Ni una gota de petróleo para los yanquis. Ni una gota de petróleo para los yanquis. El petróleo de Venezuela es de los venezolanos y venezolanas. Y eso es lo que ellos quieren. Nosotros no queremos ni una gota de petróleo más para los yanquis hasta que devuelvan al único presidente constitucional de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moro. Estimados camaradas, nos vemos hoy en estas calles y nos tendremos que ver por los próximos días y por los próximos años. Nuestra tarea es sumar más gente, claro que sí, pero sabemos que lo que...
Welcome in here on Live Now from Fox. The time is 10 o'clock on the dot over on the East Coast and 7 o'clock on the West Coast. My name is Josh Breslow, and I'll be here for the next several hours as we break down the big story that we are following, this breaking news coming in out of Venezuela. Of course, the capture of Nicolas Maduro and his wife. Now, we do know coming up in 1 hour at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, President Trump expected to address the nation on this. Again, that is 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And he does say the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, will be a part of that as well. Right now, I do want to take you out to some of the images that we do have coming in from those overnight strikes. Take a look at your screen right here in Venezuela, as President Trump did confirm that Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife, captured by the U.S. hours ago, are aboard a U.S. warship headed to New York City, where they will face prosecution. Just hours ago, Trump did confirm on Truth Social that the U.S. conducted a, quote, large-scale strike on Venezuela, capturing Maduro and his wife. Now, in an interview with Fox News, Trump explained that Secretary of War Hegseth will be at that 11 a.m. news conference that is not taking place at the White House, but rather over at Mar-a-Lago, where President Trump has been for the Christmas and New Year holidays. In that interview, reporter Brian Yennis learned that U.S. forces practiced this by building an exact replica of the house where Maduro and his wife were captured. The president also explaining that he spoke with Maduro a week ago and told him to surrender, and that the operation was delayed by 4 days due to weather. I want to discuss all of this and what it does mean overall, so let's bring in a friend of the show, Javed Ali, Associate Professor of Practice at the University of Michigan's Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy. He's held positions in the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Department of Homeland Security, and the FBI. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Josh, Happy New Year. Nice to be with you as well.
Happy New Year. And of course, I do want to get right to it. Can you kind of break down for folks who are just joining us here at the top of the hour where everything stands, what we know about this operation taking place there over in Venezuela just hours ago?
So, Josh, based on what we have heard from President Trump and other statements coming out from U.S. officials, obviously very significant development with the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. But it seems that despite the large military buildup that has occurred in the Caribbean over the last few months, the significant amount of capabilities in the region and elsewhere that could have been brought to bear was not sort of the full extent of those capabilities were not used in this operation today. And the goal seems to, at least right now, seems to have been much more limited. A capture operation using likely very specialized counterterrorism units from the U.S. military to find and capture President Maduro and his wife, and then bring them to a U.S. ship and then likely a plane to be transferred to the United States to face a criminal charge. Is a very limited objective versus a much broader campaign, similar to what we had seen in Iraq and Afghanistan going back 20 plus years. So right now, it doesn't seem like the goal is bigger than what has occurred already, but that's right now. I mean, things are still very fluid, and it's unclear what will happen in this post-Maduro landscape as well.
And I do want to pop this up on your screen. This is actually a statement that was released by Venezuela's defense minister here. This is coming out a short time ago, and I want to pop it up as it says, "The Venezuelan people have been victims of the most criminal military aggression by the United States. The barbarity of the invading forces has desecrated our sacred soil in the states of Miranda, Aragua, and several others here, even striking civilian urban areas with missiles and rockets fired from combat helicopters. We are currently gathering information on the injured and the dead, so seemingly confirming that some are dead as a result. He goes on to say, quote, "We fully support the decree declaring a state of external emergency across the entire national territory, and as a result, the men and women of the armed forces are carrying out the instructions of President Nicolas Maduro, deploying all of our capabilities. We will win. Long live the homeland," end quote. What do you take from that? What does that say to you overall? Is this an escalation? What happens next?
Well, I don't think that it's an escalation in the sense that the Venezuelan military is going to try to retaliate against the United States, even with the capabilities in the region, because they just don't have that ability to really project that kind of power. If anything, it seems to be more a political statement to show defiance to what's occurred already. But that's just rhetorical. Behind the scenes, I think there probably is some kind of competition or jockeying for power, or may likely very well be, for who is now going to replace Nicolas Maduro. Will it be Delcy Rodriguez, the current vice president, who I believe isn't even physically in Venezuela right now? Will it be people from the Venezuelan military? Will they try to step into power to just assert control in the country, while there's perhaps a perception that the country is lawless without Maduro or even Rodriguez physically being there now? Will there be some attempt to bring in opposition leaders like Maria Machado and others, sort of waiting in the wings to have them be emplaced or installed as the next leader of Venezuela? These are all questions we don't know the answers to, but the statement that you just read off, I think, is more rhetorical than an indication of an actual threat to the United States.
And of course, we do have this post. We've been reading it to you over the last, I would say, few minutes since it came in from Brian Yennis over at Fox News. We know that Trump did speak to Fox a short time ago, and we are going to play a portion of that coming up here shortly. Now, he says that Trump says he spoke to Maduro a week ago. He told Maduro, quote, "You have to give up. You have to surrender." He wasn't willing to. Any surprise there that Maduro didn't just give in and say, all right, I'm done?
Well, we've seen this in the past. There's been other media reporting that President Trump, even separate from perhaps what occurred over the past week, has tried to reach out to President Maduro. Other people in the Trump administration have tried to reach out, and Maduro has resisted that. But this also happened with Manuel Noriega in Panama, going back to 1989 into 1990, before he surrendered to U.S. forces. Actually, 36 years to this day, on January 3rd, 1990. Same thing happened with Saddam Hussein in Iraq in the lead up to the Iraq War, where in 2002 and 2003, President Bush tried to appeal to to Saddam Hussein to leave Iraq, and he didn't. And then obviously the U.S. and the international coalition launched the campaign to remove Saddam Hussein from power. So we've seen this movie play out in the past, and it appears that time and time again, these strongman leaders or dictators of other countries don't believe the U.S. is going to carry through on the threat of removal, and yet every time they seem to miscalculate on that or misread U.S. intentions or perceptions.
And I do want to remind you here, President Trump saying that Maduro and his wife are currently on a U.S. ship, and they are en route to New York, where they do face several charges, according to Attorney General Pam Bondi. We got that statement a bit earlier today. Now, President Trump is expecting to address the nation here 11 a.m. Eastern time over at Mar-a-Lago. We're waiting to get that live image in. But what question or questions do you hope that maybe we will get answered from President Trump as he does make those remarks to the nation?
So, Josh, I would expect President Trump to talk about several things. Perhaps one, what was the legal or the policy basis to engage in this operation? And it's unclear what that is, although I have a suspicion of what that might be, because there's been no congressional declaration of war or a separate authorization to use military force. But hopefully he'll sort of lay out that basis. Also, hopefully talk about sort of what is what was the goal of the removal and what comes next from a U.S. policy position of, what is the plan for a post-Maduro world in Venezuela, and how involved will the U.S. be, either from the military side or the diplomatic side? So again, unclear what that's going to look like. And then perhaps President Trump might share more details about what actually occurred, either in the run-up and the planning to capture President Maduro, or actually what happened in the execution of the raid to get him. And we've seen President Trump provide those kind of details in the past, in 2019 with the raid against the ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in Syria, where U.S. Counterterrorism forces also carried out that mission, and then the strike against the Iranian Quds Force General Qasem Soleimani, also on January 3rd, 2020, in Iraq. So President Trump has shared those kind of details in the past. Whether he does that again at 11 o'clock, it's unclear.
And my last question for you here, is it any surprise to folks out there that Maduro's wife was taken into custody as well? Because a lot of people said that they didn't necessarily know that she had been indicted as well. We knew, of course, that Maduro has been labeled the illegitimate leader there, according to Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other Trump administration officials. So what does it mean that his wife was taken into custody and captured as well? Does that add kind of another element here?
Well, I think it means that there was an indictment, or there will be an indictment against Maduro's wife, and that they will now both, the moment they step off the plane that takes them to Lower Manhattan, and they'll be arraigned in the federal court there, and that's where the Southern District of New York's jurisdiction is. That they will then be presented with the federal charges against them, and then go through the long criminal process that all defendants do here in the United States, where the Department of Justice will have to carry the burden of proof in a trial, if it goes to trial, and provide the evidence that suggests that they were guilty of those charges beyond a reasonable doubt, or they may take a different strategy and take a plea deal. We don't know how this is going to resolve itself from a law enforcement or criminal process, but that's likely the next steps that are going to happen the moment they arrive here in the United States.
And right now I'm actually looking at that indictment that just came down, Pam Bondi just releasing it. So Javed Ali, thank you so much for being here with us. We definitely appreciate it. And anything else that you want to add here before I let you go?
No, Josh, thanks for having me on as always. And again, lots of questions that we still don't have answers to, and hopefully we'll hear some insights on those when President Trump speaks at 11 o'clock.
That's what we're all hoping, and not quite clear if there will be a Q&A or anything of that nature, but we're going to bring it all to you right here on Live Now from Fox as we get it. Now, this is the original post here from Attorney General Pam Bondi, as she said, Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, have been indicted in the Southern District of New York. Nicolas Maduro has been charged with narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns and destructive devices, and conspiracy to possess machine guns and destructive devices against the United States. Again, this is that statement from Pam Bondi a bit earlier on this morning. It didn't have a lot of details yet about the origin of those charges, but she went on to say they will soon face the full wrath of the American justice on American soil in American courts. On behalf of the entire U.S. DOJ, I would like to thank President Trump for having the courage to demand accountability on behalf of the American people, and a huge thank you to our brave military who conducted the incredible and highly successful mission to capture these two alleged international narco traffickers. As I mentioned here, we are having several live images that are coming in from Venezuela. This is actually over in Caracas, where there are people who are gathered. We're talking hundreds, thousands of people there, and this is actually a better view showing even more people. And we're told that many of these people aren't necessarily Maduro supporters, but they are folks there in Venezuela who are essentially trying to figure out what is going on at this point. We know that Nicolas Maduro and his wife were captured by the U.S. after those heavy strikes that happened overnight. Again, we are following all of the latest here, and we will have President Trump's remarks coming up 11 a.m. Eastern time from Mar-a-Lago. As I mentioned, we do get that indictment that is just coming down from Pam Bondi. She posted it on Twitter. Looks like it's about 25 pages, so I am kind of looking through it now. Obviously not going to read you all of it because it is very lengthy, but essentially, to start off, it says for over 25 years, leaders of Venezuela have abused their positions of public trust and corrupted once legitimate institutions to import tons of cocaine into the U.S. So obviously here, that provides just a little bit of context as to the charges that they do face, both Maduro and his wife. What I want to do is lift up the audio once again, very briefly, so you can hear some of the commentary there. This is people chanting and cheering there in Caracas, Venezuela.
Y que este momento tiene que ser un momento para que comencemos a reflexionar en una unión verdadera. Están molesticos, lo entiendo, pero no es momento. Es momento de conversar con nuestros hermanos, camaradas, y decirles que a partir de este momento tenemos que declararnos hermanos, hermanas, en vigilia permanente, en movilización permanente, hasta que nos devuelvan a nuestro hermano presidente Nicolás Maduro Moro, que no nos lo regalaron ni lo impusieron, lo elegimos nosotros. Y tenemos que tener claridad total sobre el rol que nos toca revisar de ahora en adelante. Así que comencemos a convocar a todo aquel y Raquel para que a partir de este momento tomemos las calles y estemos vigilantes de que esto no pase o no trascienda a lo que ellos están buscando de hace rato. Así que rodilla en tierra, mi camarada, que viva la patria, viva Maduro, viva Chávez. Gracias, Tony Riggi. Bueno, tribuna abierta, por ahí también vemos a la ministra de Salud con su equipo. Camarada, su mensaje para toda Venezuela. Su nombre, ¿cuál es su nombre?
¡Viva Chávez! Voy a ser breve, por el amor de Chávez. Hace 20 años, esta persona que está aquí era indigente. Andaba en la calle comiendo la basura, robando. Ese compañero Chávez me dio la mano en la Plaza Katia. Hoy en día tengo 18 años estudiando en esta revolución.
And of course, we have been dipping into that. It is not in English, but you can hear the chanting, the cheering, and that is a lot of people, some of which are supporters of Nicolas Maduro, but also you have people who are gathering just to figure out exactly what is going on after those U.S. strikes that happened just hours ago and the capture of Nicolas Maduro, the Venezuelan leader, and his wife, who are now en route, we're told, over to New York, where they do face several charges. Now, we have this right here, as I mentioned. This is from Attorney General Pam Bondi, as she said, unsealed indictment. Thank you, U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton. Important to note that that indictment is about 25 pages long, so I've been reading through it, trying to get the latest information. We do expect that we will get much, much more coming up here in just a bit as we hear from President Trump over at Mar-a-Lago and War Secretary Pete Hegseth. All of that coming up here. We'll have it for you live and uninterrupted, as we always do. Right now, I do want to bring in a guest, a very good friend of this for folks who have only been getting bits and pieces of this. Can you break down for folks out there the whole situation that's unfolding there with the drug cartels and the strikes on the different ships out there off the coast of Venezuela? What we've seen so far and what we've watched kind of play out over the past several weeks and months.
You bet, Josh. As you and I have talked about before, since the Nixon administration, it's been called a war on drugs. And those of us who have served the term war on drugs, it's been a Vietnam on drugs. The men and women on the front lines have fought this, quote, war on drugs with both hands tied behind their. Trump coming in the office, he actually knows what the word war means, and he actually started executing a war on drugs. Nicolas Maduro is a narco terrorist. A grand jury, our fellow Americans up in New York, indicted this man. There was a $50 million bounty on his head. So he sat technically at the top of one of the largest cartels in our hemisphere. So President Trump using his authority under the law, was conducting kinetic strikes against these narco terrorists. It just kind of cracks me up that some Democrats or some folks in this country feel bad for, quote, fishermen on their narco submarines, right? Fishermen coming from Venezuela don't have, $5,000 motors, or it was comical that some folks in this country were actually supporting these narco terrorists. We lose about, I think 100,000 folks in this country to fentanyl and drug overdoses. So the president, absolutely within his authority, was conducting a no kidding war on drugs. And we're seeing the ultimate result of it at this point, which is taking the head off the snake of this, one of the largest cartels in our hemisphere.
And one thing that's interesting here, there's actually a lot of things that are interesting, but there are still so many questions about what this means for the future, all of this, those operations off the coast of Venezuela, with the capture of Nicolas Maduro and his wife. And of course, it's important to note that we can't predict the future, but what are your thoughts and kind of feelings about what could happen if we're still going to see these strikes, or if the capture of Maduro means it's over?
Well, Josh, I'm definitely in the business of never believing it's over. I'm old enough to remember President Bush on the Abraham Lincoln, my old aircraft carrier, with the Mission Accomplished banner behind him. Now, that was mission accomplished about the Lincoln finishing their cruise, but the way it looked to the American people was, hey, the war in Iraq's over with. Donald Rumsfeld, disbanded the Iraqi army and the Iraqi police forces. Hey, this is over. It isn't over. Right? It's the enemy gets a vote. We'd like to think it's over, but this just might be beginning. I'm very good friends with General Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I guarantee you he has contingency planned exhaustively for what bad could happen. How could this potentially get worse? So I'm not predicting the end of this at all. And I'd be remiss, Josh, if I didn't give a shout out. The young men and women out on the tip of the spear in the United States military have conducted an incredibly precise surgical strike and operation. The United States Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, even the Coast Guard is involved in this. So the young men and women in our United States military deserve some praise. It sounds like, I heard the president on Fox and Friends this morning. It sounds like no significant U.S. casualties, meaning hopefully everybody's got 10 fingers and 10 toes. We potentially lost a helicopter and there might have been some injuries in that. But as of now, Josh, according to some of the folks I've been talking to, no deaths on the U.S. side, which is a very good thing. So once again, this is a demonstration to the world, Josh, that the United States military is the most capable military on the planet. If you do harm to our country, we don't care if you run that country, we're going to come and get you. So shout out to the folks in the United States military. Well done. And I'm a Navy guy. I love my Navy SEALs, but this apparently was Delta Force. This is the 160th SOAR, the Night Stalkers, flying some pretty Gucci Army the Delta Force. What an incredible operation, Josh. We're going to see some movies about this, but my hat's off to the United States Army for this incredible operation.
One thing I did want to ask you about, we learned from Brian Yennis over at Fox News, and of course this is from that interview you were talking about with Fox News with President Trump a bit earlier, but he said essentially that there was practice done on a replica of the home there with Maduro and his wife where they stayed to make sure that all of this worked out correctly and that they were able to execute it. So is that a fairly standard situation? What do you make of that?
Oh, Josh, they started this stuff probably a month or two ago when they started these kinetic strikes against the drug boats. General Kane, we were pre-positioning all of these assets, right, Josh? We had the battle group down there, the amphibious readiness group. We had Ospreys pre-positioned. When you're a foreign country and see the United States military taking a month or two to pre-position all these assets around you, you should probably sit up straight. So just like when Laden raid, they built a compound to the inch, that replica compound, and they assaulted that. And like I alluded to a little earlier, Josh, we contingency plan. What if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? What if this helicopter goes down? What if the refueling, plane goes down? What if this thing to death? We want to minimize all known risks. Combat is pretty tough, and they say that most plans don't survive the the first bullet shot at you by the enemy. So we'll do death by planning. I mean, we will just plan it to death. And then ultimately, when the commander in charge of this operation says, you know what, we've exhausted all of our planning, we've contingency planned this, we are ready to go. And I guarantee you that's exactly what happened. And General Kane, through Secretary Hegseth, went to the president and said, we're ready to go. And they were over-prepared, I guarantee you.
As I mentioned, we are going to play for you here in a second that portion of the interview that President Trump did conduct here with Fox News. But I do want to pop this up as Brian Yennis, again, we've been talking about this, said Trump tells Fox U.S. forces practice by building an exact replica of the house where Maduro and his wife were captured. Quote, I mean, everything was pinpoint, every single they had, everything they practiced. They actually built a house which was identical to the one they went into with all the safes, all the steel, all over the place. President Trump likely to address all of this as he does speak from Mar-a-Lago coming up here in just about 3 minutes. We're, of course, going to carry that live in full, commercial-free here on Live Now from Fox. Any questions, Wiz, that you hope will potentially be answered during this news conference? What kind of questions do you still have?
Josh, I think the president gave a pretty good interview on Fox and Friends, and we're seeing it play out. So technically, I really don't have too many questions, but I have to give a shout out to the Secretary of War and the War Department. The OPSEC, the operational security on this, was tight. You know as well as I do, man, Washington, it used to leak like a sieve. As a matter of fact, this time last year, there was folks in this country calling for Hegseth's head for Signalgate. Remember that? Well, this thing was locked down tighter than a snare drum. I know a lot of folks running around DC, and sometimes I get a little tipper every once in a while. I got nothing, Josh, which tells me that the operational security on this was airtight. So I think you're going to hear the president obviously give us a lot of details that we didn't know, but good on the War Department for not having any leaks at all. This was a highly surgical operation that clearly the enemy didn't know about either. I mean, Josh, the Chinese delegation met with Maduro earlier. I mean, I've seen video of him shaking hands with whatever Chinese dude came to talk to him and meet with him, and then hours later, he's in U.S. custody. This is a huge message, not only to all the narco-terrorists in the region, but to China, to Russia, to Iran, and also North Korea. And Josh, as you know, I trade the markets. Not that we should super care about this, but this is very bullish for oil. This is great for Americans. Lower oil costs, folks, at the pump directly goes to our bottom line because he was evading sanctions, as we saw with us capturing some of these tankers. So we are tightening down on all of this. And also, Josh, Venezuela has a ton of rare earth minerals in their country, which China has been really tightening. I mean, these things go in our cell phones, our laptops, our weapons. So we didn't do it for this reason. And I want to get that clear, but it's going to have second and third order effects for the United States as well. Number one, saving the lives of folks who potentially could be killed by these drugs. And then other good things will come from this as well.
I did want to ask you one more question here based on what you were just talking about. You mentioned the fact that there were no leaks. Now, we know that when there is an operation of any kind, a lot of times there's a source or several sources who do reveal that something is going to happen. How did that maybe help the situation here that somehow there were no leaks? Nobody knew that this was going to happen. This was a surprise to probably just about everyone when they woke up this morning.
Correct. Well, Josh, I think that's a testament to the administration and them kind of weeding out the leakers. Like after Signalgate happened, and he caught a lot of grief for this, but he didn't care. Secretary Hegseth went and clipped a lot of potential leakers. The folks on the tip of the spear, the young men and women flying the helicopters, the Delta Force operators, the Marine, the Coasties, they're tighter than a snare drum. We know about operational security. We know that leaks can get people killed. So you weren't going to get a leak from anybody wearing a uniform. It was the leaks that were coming from folks wearing coat and ties or skirts or dresses who probably aren't too happy with who is in the White House right now. So operational security is easy when you have the right people on the team who are aligned with the mission. Operational security is very hard when you got people on board who don't want the best for you or technically for this country.
All right. Wiz, thank you so much, as always, for being here with anything we missed, anything you want to make sure to add here before I let you go.
No, good question, Josh. You nailed it. But once again, shout out to the young men and women of the United States military for doing their job, for doing what we pay you to do. And please, even though this might appear over, it might not be over, please send some thoughts, some prayers, some love and light to these folks, that everybody gets home to their loved ones safe.
Wiz, thank you again for being here, as always. We definitely appreciate it.
Thanks, Josh. God bless. We'll see you.
And of course, we are going to continue to follow all of this as we await those remarks coming in from President Donald Trump. That's set to happen here just about 30 minutes, 11 a.m. Eastern time, over from Mar-a-Lago, where he says Secretary of War Pete Hegseth will be there as well. So we're going to bring you all of those commercial-free and live the second that we see that image pop up. If you are just joining us, my name is Josh Breslow, and I told you that President Trump spoke a bit earlier with Fox News, and we now have a portion of that interview where he did talk about the process of this operation and how it played out. Going to play that for you right now.
Morning.
So you've had quite a busy evening. Tell us about it.
It was slightly busy. I was very dark all over, especially in Venezuela. The team did an incredible job. They rehearsed and practiced like nobody's ever seen. And I was told by real military people, that there's no other country on earth that can do such a maneuver. If you would have seen what happened, I mean, I watched it literally like I was watching a television show. And if you would have seen the speed, the violence, you know, they say that, the speed, the violence, they use that term. It was an amazing thing, an amazing job that these people did. There's nobody else could have done anything like it.
You're at Mar-a-Lago right now. How were you able to watch this?
Well, we watched it from a room. We had a room, and we watched it, and we watched every aspect of it. We were surrounded by lots of people, including generals, and they knew everything that was happening, and it was very complex, extremely complex, the whole maneuver, the landings, the number of aircraft, which were a massive number, the number of helicopters, a different type of helicopters, different type of fighter jets. We had a fighter jet for every possible situation. And they just broke in, and they broke into places that were not really able to be broke into, you know, steel doors that were put there for just this reason. And they got taken out in a matter of seconds. I've never seen anything like it, actually.
And you were able to watch this in real time.
Yeah, and don't forget, I've done some pretty good ones in other parts of the world. Okay, I've done some pretty good ones, but I've never seen anything like this. I was able to watch it in real time, and I watched every aspect of it, and I listened to the communication between, you know, where we were in Florida and out in the field in Venezuela. And it was amazing to see the professionalism, the quality of leadership, the professionalism. General Raisin Kane is fantastic. Don't forget, we did another one not so long ago. It was called the knocking out of the Iranian nuclear threat, the nuclear power. And that was unbelievable what they did there. And this is something that, gee, I don't know, it's amazing. And to have a few injuries, but no on our side is really amazing.
Mr. President, critics will say that strong action can risk escalation, but history has shown us that weakness can truly invite chaos. And this military operation clearly sends a message to our adversaries around the world, China, Iran, Russia, that we are no longer the weak administration that we had for 4 years under former President Biden, who tolerated narco-terrorism. What is next for the United States and Venezuela?
Well, we're very strong, and very importantly, if you look at drugs through the oceans, through the seas, they're down 97%. That's the boats. It's sort of related to this, as you know. The drugs are way down, and it's getting very, very tough. It's a whole different look. We have a whole different country. We have a country now that's respected. We have a country. I built the military in my first term, and they gave a little chunk of it away, but it was a lot. but it was a little chunk relative to what we built. But they gave it to Afghanistan so stupidly. It was one of the, compare this to Afghanistan, where we were a laughing stock all over the world. We're not a laughing stock anymore. No, we have the greatest military in the world by far. We have the greatest equipment, military equipment in the world by far. And you had to see this in real time. You had to see this, the professionalism and the bravery, everything about it. And you almost couldn't hold them back. It was like they wanted to go so badly. And most people would have said, I'll take a pass. I know that Charlie would have wanted to go because Charlie's a very brave person. But I know a lot of other people would have said, I think I'll pass on this one. Let's watch it on television. So it's been amazing to see how good they were, how professional they were, how incredible the equipment we have is. I mean, the level of equipment and to see how it worked so perfectly. And, you know, if you compare this to attacks on Iran over the years with, you know, helicopters crashing into each other, the whole thing was a mess. The Jimmy Carter situation, which was a mess, and every other situation compared to this, nobody's ever seen like this. Look, the Iranian attack, knocking out power was big. We had peace in the Middle East, and we have it. Without that, you could never have peace in the Middle East. We knocked them out, and look what's happening now to Iran, but we knocked it out. That was, it could not have been better, and this could not have been better. I don't even know which is, these are both really important. If you think about equal and importance, I wonder how it's going to be rated, but knocking out the nuclear power of, think of it, they were ready, they were within 2 months, they would have been a nuclear power. And comparing that to this in a certain different way, I think this might have been actually more complex.
Well, it's interesting.
But that was something that was amazing.
It's interesting, Mr. President. We've looked, our own Lucas Tomlinson, our reporter here, I don't know if you knew this intentionally, but the capture of Maduro and his wife, it coincides with the 6th anniversary of your taking out the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's Qasem Soleimani. Interestingly, it's six years after. But let me ask you a question, Mr. President. Because,
by the way, that was the third thing, and we have a fourth. We got Soleimani, we have taken out so many. Look at what we did to the leader of ISIS, who's no longer with us, right? And everybody was after for 20 years, and we got him. We've done a lot, but this was something, maybe because it's fresh in our minds, because again, the Iranian situation was so big, that out, and the B-2 bomber, every single missile hit its target, and the target was an air shaft.
Right. Dark
at night. Think of that. Dark at night, no moon. You couldn't see a thing, and every missile went right through that air shaft and just obliterated the place. So that was amazing, and this was amazing.
I wonder, Mr. President, though, I want to ask you because from your Vice President, J.D. Vance, said that the message is pretty clear. The drug trafficking must stop. So was this operation a message that you're sending to Mexico, to Claudia Sheinbaum, the president there?
Well, it wasn't meant to be, and we're very friendly with her. She's a good woman, but the cartels are running Mexico. She's not running Mexico. The cartels are running Mexico. And we could be politically correct and be nice and say, oh, yes, she is. No, she's very, she's very frightened of the cartels. They're running Mexico. And I've asked her numerous times, would you like us to take out the cartels? No, Mr. President. No, please. So we have to do something because we lost. The real number is 300,000 people, in my opinion. They like to say 100,000. 100,000 is a lot of people, but the real number is 300,000 people. And we lost it to drugs, and they come in through the southern border, mostly the southern border. Plenty come in through Canada, too, by the way, in case you don't know. But they come in through the southern border, and something's going to have to be done with Mexico.
Why did you decide to do this morning?
Are you talking about calling you people or the shot?
No, taking out Maduro.
I'm not sure which is worse, if you want to know the truth. I'm calling you. I haven't spoken to anybody else because Charlie Hurd has been a great friend of mine for a long time. He was with me when it was not fashionable. And those are the people I like. He was with me, Charlie, when it was not at all fashionable. So That's the reason I'm doing this, and your show is great. You're doing a great job. What a good team.
But I meant, why did you make the decision to take out Maduro this morning? And what was Maduro doing when our guys came in on him?
So we were going to do this 4 days ago, but the weather was not perfect. The weather has to be perfect. And we had just the perfect weather. We had, very good. A little bit few more clouds than we thought, but it was good. We waited 4 days. We were going to do this 4 days ago, 3 days ago, 2 days ago. And then all of a sudden it opened up and we said go. And I'll tell you, it was just amazing. And what was he doing? He was in a very highly guarded, like a fortress, actually. He was in a fortress. That we had nobody killed was amazing. I think we had nobody killed, I have to say, because a couple of guys were hit, but they came back and they're supposed to be in pretty good shape. But that we had nobody killed, that we lost no aircraft. Everything came back. We got it all back. One of them was hit pretty hard, but a helicopter, but we got it back. But it just was the right time to do it. We had to do it because it's a war. We're losing 300,000 people a year. We don't lose that much in a war, okay, if you look. And we had to do it. But he was in a house that was more like a fortress than a house. It had steel doors. It had what they call a safety space where it's, solid steel all around. He didn't get that space closed. He was trying to get into it, but he got bum rushed so fast that he didn't get into that. We were prepared. We had, massive blowtorch to get through that steel, but we didn't need it. He didn't make it to that area.
Mr. President, your war on narcoterrorism from our southern border and beyond clearly will save American lives. Moving forward for Venezuela, what do you think is next for the Venezuelan people now that you have removed Maduro so that he can face American justice?
Well, we're making that decision now. We can't take a chance on letting somebody else run and just take over where he left or left off. So we're making that decision now. We'll be involved in it very much. And we want to do liberty for the people. We want to, have a great relationship. I think the people of Venezuela are very, very happy because they love the United States. They were run by essentially a dictatorship or worse. It couldn't have been worse. It was thing that was taking place in Venezuela. But look, tremendous numbers of people were being killed through drugs. And what they did to our country in sending prisoners and people from mental institutions and drug lords and everything, they sent them by the hundreds of thousands of people into our country. And that is just unforgivable. That's why, he wanted to negotiate at the end, and I didn't want to negotiate. I said, nope, we got to do it. He was trying to negotiate at the end. You probably saw that. And trying hard to make a deal. And I said, this could have been a very foolish thing if it didn't work out. But I said, nope, we can't do it. What he did with drugs was bad. What he did with a lot of other things was bad. But what he did was sending hundreds of thousands of Tren de Aragua and drug dealers. And they emptied out their jails into our country. They emptied out, if you think about it, they emptied out all of their mental institutions into our country. What he did there, and every other thing, is unforgivable.
Mr. President, you're already getting reaction from members of Congress on both sides. One Democrat, Jim McGovern, is saying that you did not get authorization from Congress. And he says Trump just launched an unjustified illegal strike on Venezuela. Wanted to get your reaction to that.
Well, look, these are weak, stupid people. And they're trying to save themselves from almost destroying our country. If I didn't get elected, our country would not. I don't even think we'd have a country right now. We were heading down the path of destruction. We had inflation. We had high prices. They're the ones that caused high prices, not us. We're bringing the prices way down. We have oil now in many places $1.99 a gallon. And when you do oil, everything follows, but everything is following. But no, they would have destroyed our country if we didn't get elected. If Kamala or a Joe type got elected, if that group got elected. But if Kamala got elected, I don't think at this point we would even have a country. We were laughed at all over the world. The money was flowing out. Everybody was leaving. The companies were leaving. The people were leaving. The wealth was leaving. We have $18 trillion coming back into our country, the biggest number in the history of the world. The second biggest number was $3 trillion. We're at $18 trillion, and it's building factories and plants. It's doing things that no country has ever seen before. But as far as last night concerned, it was really genius. What they did is genius. And the Democrats, maybe they'll take a shot. You know, they'll take a shot. All they do is complain. They don't talk about, they should say, you know what, we did a great job. We're stopping drugs from coming into this country. And nobody's been able to do it until we came along. But they should say, great job. They shouldn't say, oh, gee, maybe it's not constitutional. You know, the same old stuff that we've been hearing for years and years and years. They did an incredible job. These men and women that went out there last night, the courage they had, going into an area where, you know, all the lights were turned off. We turned off almost all of the lights in Caracas. I mean, this thing was so organized. And they go into a dark space with machine guns facing them all over the place. And then you hear from a guy that I'd never even heard of him. But you hear from...
All right, so again, those were some of the comments that we did receive from President Trump as he spoke over the phone with folks there at Fox News. That was just a couple hours ago. Now, I do want to remind you, coming up here in just a matter of moments, we expect that President Trump will address the nation on all of this coming in from Mar-a-Lago. We should be getting a live image as that is set to take place here at about 11 a.m. Eastern time. We're going to bring those to you here live as we always do. Now, as I mentioned a bit earlier, we have been combing through this indictment, 25 pages worth of information about the indictment against Maduro and his wife. And as we take a live look at this hour over Caracas here, this is in Venezuela, I do want to bring you what we learned from that, as the indictment does accuse Maduro of leading a, quote, corrupt, illegitimate government that for decades has leveraged government power to protect and promote illegal activity, including drug trafficking, end quote. Now, it does allege that the drug trafficking efforts, quote, enriched and entrenched Venezuela's political and military elite. U.S. authorities there alleging that Maduro partnered with, quote, some of the most violent and prolific drug traffickers and narco-terrorists in the world to bring tons of cocaine into the U.S. Again, that is according to that 25-page indictment. Authorities estimate that as much as 250 tons of cocaine were trafficked through Venezuela by 2020. And the drugs were moved on go-fast vessels, fishing boats, and container ships, or via planes from clandestine airstrips. Again, all of this coming in from those documents. Now, if you are just joining us here, President Trump revealing the U.S. launched strikes in Venezuela, and we do have video of some of that I do want to pop up on your screen right here. Again, this is from just hours ago, as President Trump says that they have captured the Venezuelan leader, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife, all happening here amid Trump's war on the drug cartels, which has seen strikes on suspected drug-carrying vessels off the coast of Venezuela. And these are just some of the videos of those strikes released by the Department of War. President Trump saying that Maduro and his wife, who have both been indicted in the U.S., are now en route to New York to face prosecution, and they are en route via U.S. ship. So we should see them arrive. We should get those live images here. And of course, we'll bring those to you live as we get them. Bring in a friend of the show here, Mark Chandler. He is Director of Government Relations at Coastal Carolina University and also a former senior. Thank you so much, Mark, for taking the time to be here with us this morning. Obviously, a lot of developments.
Oh, gosh, you're welcome. You're right. There is a lot happening today.
For sure. And first off, just as a former senior defense intelligence official, I did want to ask, based on what we know so far, what has stood out to you about the operation and really what we saw play out?
Well, I think one of the things that really stood out to me was the operational security surrounding this operation. You know, you get a lot of these operations, and the critical part to success is focused on operational security. Make sure no one knows what we're about to do, because we're putting our military forces in harm's way. And so I think the fact that they did that was critical leading up to this operation. The second thing that stands out to me was the phenomenal intelligence work behind this operation. Number one, the forces had to rehearse this for weeks. There was talk you just had up there about, a mock buildup of the facility where Maduro was living. And so they had to have great intelligence to be able to get the entire diagrams, the layout of that facility, where Maduro was, what we call a pattern of life. So in other words, Maduro would go to the presidential offices. He would travel this way. He would be at his house at this location. Here's the guards around him. So it takes a lot of time to develop that finite type of intelligence. So hats off not only to the operators who conducted this, but the intelligence personnel that helped build up this information to facilitate the success for this. It was critical and a great intelligence operation.
And one thing that's interesting and stood out to a lot of people, President Trump telling Fox there that, yes, there were some injuries here. However, he says it does not appear that any Americans were killed in the process. How does that kind of detail how intricate this process was for this operation? The fact that no Americans, as of right now, to our knowledge, were killed in the strikes there.
Well, again, that's absolute. It speaks to the professionalism of our military forces, especially Delta and the 160th. They're the elite of the elite when they go in and we conduct these type of operations. So not only did they have good intelligence, they rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. One of your previous guests talked about, working all your way through the rehearsal aspect so that you can be prepared for any kind of contingency that comes up in these operations. So this kind of reminds me of the bin Laden raid. Back when we did that, we had a mock-up of the facility, and the SEALs rehearsed that operation tremendously to ensure that once the forces got on the objective, they knew what was likely to happen, where everything was, and they get in and they get out. It was a quick operation. I think what you see with the bombings, there was a lot of taking out some of the assets, and there's probably going to, if they reveal it, a lot of information about other aircraft flying off the coast of Venezuela, jamming communications, ensuring that the Venezuelan military could not react fast enough to stop us from conducting this operation. So they went in, they did what we call actions on the objective. They took Maduro and his wife, they captured them and then pulled out. They did that so quickly. And I believe some of the bombing campaign was to stop some of the reinforcements that would go to the palace, but also to distract the Venezuelan military, kind of think that we're coming in a different place. All of this facilitated the moves on the palace itself where Maduro was being held so that they could get in and get out as quickly as possible. I think when it comes down to it, and they reveal the details, you'll find that they were actually on the objective a very limited amount of time for something that you would consider this major an operation.
And of course, if you're watching us here, we did have that live image coming in out of Mar-a-Lago. It did go down here, but we expect the feed will come back at some point here shortly. And of course, we're going to get those full remarks from President Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. We'll bring those to you in full, commercial free. That's what we do here on Live Now from Fox. Mark, what questions do you hope that maybe President Trump will answer during this news conference, or Hegseth, that maybe we don't know at this point?
Well, first, I'd like an update on the wounded. If there were, in fact, anybody wounded, I'd like to know about that, just so that we kind of reminder to the American populace that when we do these operations, there are human beings that we are putting in harm's way. And so I would like to hear an update on that, just to know that, one, there were no killed in action on this. We conducted the operation. And then I think what you're probably going to see, and I think some of the political opposition, whether they listen to it or not, but kind of help the American people understand the legal case that was laid out in conducting this operation. Not only was Delta involved in the 160th, but there were law enforcement personnel involved on this raid, and that goes to the legal aspect of conducting this. So perhaps lay that case out to help the American public understand a little bit better on this. As I said, maybe the opposition will understand. I don't know if you want to support Maduro, his drug capabilities that counter his narco-terrorism aspects, then you're going to argue that way anyway and not listen to the facts. So I'd like to see that. What I hope that they don't reveal are some of the intricacies of the operation itself. We know Maduro was taken to the USS Iwo Jima. That's what we call a large deck amphibious ship off the coast of Venezuela. A lot of Marines on that. So that's probably the staging ground from where the operation was conducted. Now they're going to move Maduro onward onto New York, get him onto an airfield, move him in an aircraft to New York to face the charges that he was indicted on later. So let's lay out some of those aspects, but not give all the operational details.
For sure. And I actually want to read you this statement that came in a bit earlier. We read this to you as we received it, but this is from Venezuela's defense chief, and it's on the Maduro capture. This is the Minister of Defense who said, quote, "The Venezuelan people have been victims of the most criminal military aggression by the United States. The barbarity of the invading forces has desecrated our sacred soil, even striking civilian urban areas with missiles and rockets fired from combat helicopters. We are currently gathering information on the injured and the dead. We fully support the decree declaring a state of external emergency across the entire national territory, and as a result, the men and women of the armed forces are carrying out the instructions of President Nicolas Maduro, deploying all of our capabilities. We will win. Long live the homeland," end quote. Again, that is from the Minister of Defense there in Venezuela. What does that say to you? Does that talk about escalation? Is that a threat? What do you make of that?
I think he had to come out and try to put up some machismo, if you will, for the Venezuelan populace, but not so much the Venezuelan populace, because this is not a popular regime in Venezuela. I think more for the military. He's speaking to the military, pushing back on the United States, sovereignty. These are kind of boilerplate statements that you'd expect. And I have to add this a little bit about him, Josh. He is one of the inner circle, Maduro's inner circle. The vice president, the interior minister, and the defense minister were all part of the same group who helped maintain this draconian control over the Venezuelan leadership and government. So I think when you look at that, I would expect him to say that. I don't see a military response from Venezuela, though. I see them really concerned about a rising on the streets, a protest against the Maduro regime. The regime has not been replaced. So now they're trying to scramble to see who's going to get in charge of these three, the vice president, interior minister, and defense minister. But they need to consolidate control of the military, because the military is what keeps them in power. So you're going to see some jockeying for that throughout the day or the next couple of days.
And there on the left-hand side of your screen, you're taking a live look over Mar-a-Lago, where those remarks should begin shortly. Now, we did have a live image that I tried to pop up there on the left-hand side of your screen. It showed a lot of press there at Mar-a-Lago for this as they were making their final preparations. Unfortunately, the shot went out by the time I took it, but we should be getting that shot back here in just a second, as those remarks are set to begin in just about 2.5 minutes. What do we need to be watching for over the next coming hours, days, and maybe even weeks here?
Well, I think you need to go back to that statement you just had on the screen there, Josh. And I think looking at what the Venezuelan leadership, number one, how they're going to consolidate control. Do they maintain control of the military? Because as I said, that's what gives them the power. There is a chance. Venezuela has a military, not anything as capable as the United States. They could try something, and I would call it outlandish, to go against the U.S. military, try to take some sort of counteraction at their low level. They might have a modicum of success of doing something or getting close to one of our assets, but I think they're going to hold back on trying to do something significant, because they know that the U.S. military could pretty much take out anything they need to do. And we don't have a fight with the Venezuelan people. This doesn't look like we're trying to, one, overthrow a regime, two, go against the Venezuelan people. There are repressed people by this leadership. So hopefully you could see an uprising in the streets. Again, it's going to go to how the military kind of clamps down. That's what you're going to see. You're going to see pro-Maduro protests. They're going to turn out the population. They're going to get people in the streets to make it look like Maduro was more popular than he is. So you'll see that, but it'll be choreographed. None of this is going to be a spontaneous support of Maduro across the Venezuelan population.
And I did want to mention here, it actually sounds like the news conference with President Trump might be starting on time, because, again, we're waiting on that live image to come back, but we did just get the alert from the White House, which normally comes out really just a few minutes before he does walk up to the podium. So, again, we're waiting on that shot to come in. We will definitely have it for you, and we'll make sure to bring it to you in full, commercial-free. We also know from President Trump that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth should be there as well to possibly answer questions, but at least make remarks on the situation there. We also have these live images that are coming in here out of Caracas and other areas of Venezuela, where you can see folks who are not necessarily supporters of Maduro in the street. Many of them are actually there because they're trying to piece together exactly what has happened over the past several hours here. And I did want to get your take on this, Mark. For the new regime there in Venezuela, does the U.S., and this is based on really your expertise, I'm not sure if you'll have the full answer, but would the U.S. play any sort of role in any of that?
Just clarification, Josh, are you talking about the legally elected regime that's been kind of in exile for a while? Or are you talking about how this new cabal is really taking over? Just clarification, Josh, are you talking about the legally elected regime that's been kind of in exile for a while? Or are you talking about how this new cabal is really taking over after Maduro left?
I'm going to say both. I want to get your take on both of those.
Okay. All right. First off, I think you are going to see a consolidation of power. There actually may be a jockeying of power. The vice president, she doesn't have a lot of control there. She doesn't necessarily have the backing of the military. So you could see either a co-leadership between the interior minister and the defense minister, or you could see one of those try to take more charge. Outside chance, you could see the military come in and say, we need to step in and take control of this. So you could have that. If there is some dissension in there, we could see a fracturing of that leadership as it goes through. I don't think we're going to be able to see the opposition just fly back into Venezuela and take over. You're going to have to get rid of this core group of Maduro supporters, those people who were involved. I think the U.S. can increase its messaging. We can increase messaging to the Venezuelan people, but this really now has to come from within. So I think we can support the opposition, and work our way through building that case. You're going to hear a lot of noise from the international community. Violation of sovereignty. We've already heard that from Colombia and Mexico. The UN's going to speak out. Cuba, Iran, Russia, China, they're all going to speak out against the United States and the illegal operations. But I think that's just noise. Let's put that in the noise category and see what we can do to build a popular support for the legally elected president if we can get her back in the country.
I also wanted to ask you, kind of going back to something that we were talking about earlier, also want to mention that it looks like we are going to be getting that image back here shortly of President Trump at Mar-a-Lago, so that kind of indicates to us this is going to start in a matter of moments. So the second it does, you'll be able to watch it in full right here on Live Now. But one thing I do want to go back to is something that you mentioned. We're talking about the fact that there were no leaks. The information did not get out there ahead of these strikes. Based on what you've seen, is that surprising? Because normally you do have folks who, behind the scenes, will maybe give a tip to somebody and say, this is what's going to happen, prepare for this, that sort of thing. So is that surprising that the information didn't get out there? And also, what role does that play in kind of helping with the operation?
Well, first off, I am surprised that there were no leaks on this, and I'm very pleased to that. One of the biggest things when I worked on the Joint Chiefs of Staff, we would conduct these type of operations around the world, and unfortunately, somebody who felt they had the knowledge and the power of that knowledge wanted to leak something to the press. That puts our forces in harm's way, and I really, really despise those type of leaks that would go out there just for somebody to show they had that information. So good on the administration for this one. I've heard talk this morning about notifying Congress. The executive branch does have to notify Congress, but it doesn't say they have to notify them before the operation. And every administration I worked for, we were hesitant to notify in advance, what we call the Gang of Eight, the leaders of the House and the Senate and the intelligence committees. So when we looked at that, we wouldn't notify them for the purpose of operational security, OPSEC. We didn't want that to leak out, especially if they were going to speak out against something. They'll notify them today. They'll give them a full mission briefing and let them know what happened. They'll lay out the legal case for it, and that's fine afterwards. But I don't think I want to hear any conversations today about how they weren't notified, because I can go back to Democratic and Republican administrations and we would not notify in advance of these operations. So that's good for OPSEC. I'm glad we had that.
Yeah, and right now you can see we did get that live image coming back here as those final preparations are being made for President Trump to make those remarks. Now you can see the stand is there, and there is a lot of media, I can tell you, that are in this room. Let me pop up this other angle that we do have for you. Look at all of those reporters on the left-hand side of your screen, and that is just a few of them. Again, President Trump expected to walk in here in just a matter of moments to address the nation on this Venezuela operation, the capture of Maduro and his wife. We're going to bring you those remarks in full the second that we do get them. And we're looking at all of this, kind of gathering the latest information that is coming into our newsroom. Mark, anything that you think we missed? Anything you want to make sure to add here before I let you go?
Josh, this is a highly fluid situation. You're doing a great job covering it, trying to keep the public informed about how this is evolving. I think you covered everything really well. I would look for internal dissension inside Venezuela and see if the military cracks, or because I'll tell you one other thing we didn't address, Josh, is they had to have somebody on the inside to help get us this information on Maduro's location. That's part of a human network. If we got that, are we starting to get fissures inside the Venezuelan leadership? That would be good if we can start to crack that and start to open up some sort of fissure in this leadership group that's running Venezuela illegally right now. So I think we can watch for that over the next few days.
And actually, would you be able to go a little bit more in depth on that? Because I hadn't even really thought about that. And that's something that hasn't been mentioned, is that it sounds like there are some insiders there in Venezuela that are helping the U.S. And I would imagine that's got to be pretty standard. We know, for instance, you and I discuss Israel a lot and the situation going on there. We know there were people, for instance, the pagers that blew up with Hezbollah. There was somebody inside to help make all of that happen. So you have to imagine that there's some people there in Venezuela who want to help out the U.S. with all of this.
Yeah, there are dissatisfied people within Venezuela, and that's what we try to look for, is look at that and see if we can gain some access to those individuals, who want to help their country, and they do help their country by helping us. So we get that information, we get that access to them, and that I talked earlier about developing a pattern of life, Maduro's pattern of life, what his daily schedule was, what bedroom he's in, where he eats dinner, and all those finite details. So we can work on that, get that inside access to information. Now, those people are taking a great risk, because if they're discovered, and then in a regime like Maduro's, they're all the time purging people they feel disloyal, whether they're right or not. So they'll go in and purge them. So somebody took significant risk to support the United States internally. I think that speaks a lot to Maduro's unpopularity with the general population, but also let's look at how we can develop this source and then move forward on some of the, actually, when I talked actions on the objective earlier, we were talking about, okay, where are we going to move? How's he going to be? Where's he going to be? What's the security outside his bedroom? He had a lot of Cuban support inside Venezuela. His closest ally is Cuba, and a lot of reports said that Cuban guards were actually his closest guards. So you're looking at getting some finite information from these sources, and something that we will use to kind of work in the final bits of the actions, as I said, actions on the objective.
All right, Mark Chandler, thank you so much for taking the time, as always, to be here with us and helping to break it all down. We definitely appreciate it.
Josh, you're quite welcome, and good luck covering this situation today. It's going to keep evolving.
Oh, for sure. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And you are taking a live look here in Mar-a-Lago once again. We did get a 5-minute warning, so probably closer to about 4 minutes now before these remarks do begin. So looks like they're running just a little bit behind, but by 11:11, 11:12, somewhere around there, we should have President Trump. And as I mentioned, we are going to bring this to you in full. That is what we do here on Live Now from Fox, and you can watch it commercial free. We also know that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth will be a part of this news conference as well. What I want to do is pull up this image right here. Now, we do have this statement that came in from the defense minister. This was over in Venezuela, where Mark and I were kind of just discussing this, but he said the Venezuelan people have been victims of the most criminal military aggression by the United States The barbarity of the invading forces has desecrated our sacred soil, even striking civilian urban areas with missiles and rockets fired from combat helicopters. We are currently gathering information on the injured and dead, so seemingly confirming that some people were injured and dead as a result of the U.S. strikes there on Venezuela. They did say, we fully support the decree declaring a state of external emergency across the entire national territory. And as a result, the men and women of the armed forces are carrying out the instructions of President Nicolas Maduro.
Is the president
all of our capabilities, we will win. Long live the homeland. And of course, likely that we will see President Trump specifically address that as he does take to the podium here in a second. Now, we also heard from Vice President J.D. Vance, who said the president offered multiple off-ramps, but was very clear throughout this process that drug trafficking must stop and the stolen oil must be returned to the United States. Maduro is the newest person to find out that President Trump means what he says. Kudos to our brave special operators who pulled off a truly impressive operation. He went on to say, and PSA for everyone saying this was illegal, Maduro has multiple indictments in the United States for narco-terrorism. You don't get to avoid justice for drug trafficking in the United States because you live in a palace in Caracas. Again, we're monitoring the feeds right here, and we are awaiting those comments from President Donald Trump that should be getting underway here in a matter of moments, and we're going to bring them to you in full. That's what we do here on Live Now from Fox. And as we are just past the top of the hour here, it is right now 11:10 on the East Coast and 8:10 on the West Coast. It is Saturday, January 3rd. My name is Josh Breslow, and we are going to continue to bring you coverage throughout the day as we get much more information on the detainment, so to speak, of Nicolas Maduro, the leader there in Venezuela, as well as his wife, both of whom were detained there by U.S. officials overnight, really just hours ago, as there were large-scale strikes that were conducted by the U.S. And what you're probably seeing is I keep looking down, and I did want to point out that the reason for that is we are keeping an eye on the different feeds coming in, and I'm trying to make sure that the second that we see President Trump walk in, we are able to bring that to you in full. Again, this is a live look at the stage as we learn the latest on all of this. So if you are just joining us, we did learn some information from President Trump as he spoke with Fox News a bit earlier on this morning. President Trump revealing that the U.S. did launch those strikes in Venezuela and captured Nicolas Maduro and his wife. This all happening amid Trump's war on the drug cartels, which has seen strikes on suspected drug-carrying vessels off the coast of Venezuela. Now, President Trump saying that Maduro and his wife, who have both been indicted in the U.S., are en route to New York to face prosecution. The indictment itself, about 25 pages in length, we were looking through it, and essentially it accuses Maduro of leading a, quote, corrupt, illegitimate government that for decades has leveraged government power to protect and promote illegal activity, including drug trafficking. It alleges that the drug trafficking efforts, quote, enriched and entrenched Venezuela's political and military elite. U.S. authorities allege that Maduro partnered with, quote, some of the most violent and prolific drug traffickers. Drug trafficking efforts, quote, enriched and entrenched Venezuela's political and military elite. U.S. authorities allege that Maduro partnered with, quote, some of the most violent and prolific drug traffickers and narco-terrorists in the world to bring tons of cocaine into the U.S., again, according to the documents that we were able to get our hands on here. Authorities estimate that as much as 250 tons of cocaine were trafficked through Venezuela by 2020. The drugs were moved on go-fast vessels, fishing boats, and container ships or via planes from clandestine airstrips. Again, we are following all of the details. We did hear from President Trump a bit earlier, who said that Maduro and his wife are en route via U.S. ship over to the U.S., specifically to New York, where they have been indicted. We are also waiting to see if we do get live images of their arrival. There have been some images that are circulating online